We're talking golf on Proline TV, and we have a signature event this week to cover, the Arnold Palmer Invitational, and that'll be followed by the Players Championship next week. So we have back-to-back premier events on the PGA Tour for 2025, and only a month away, or give or take a few days, from the Masters, the big one of them all. How's it going there, Brady, as we get ready for another couple of weeks of awesome golf?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple of big ones on deck. And, then we get to the Valspar Championship and a couple stops in Texas. And then we make our way down Magnolia Lane. But, the buildup is always great. And last week was a very good tournament. We almost got home with JJ Spahn, but, out of nowhere, Joe Highsmith. That's been a few tournaments, Greg. 3 out of the last 4 events have been won by what is, for the most part, a triple-digit odds guy. You've got Brian Campbell coming out of nowhere in Mexico, Joe Highsmith, and then Thomas Dietrich in Phoenix as well. Now we have a signature event, so obviously there's really not a nobody, so to speak, for lack of a better word, a lesser-known player, I guess, if you will, in this field. Now Joe Highsmith is here because of the win and what have you, but odds are we're going to get a marquee name coming out on top in this field.
Yeah, odds are. And they have definitely, that's a trend that we'll talk about in just a little bit. Interesting. I mean, going into next year, though, when we talk about the Cognizant Classic, man, I mean, we're going to be talking, I mean, we brought it up going in there. And the fact is that you're getting these really, players from nowhere that are getting wins. I mean, Highsmith was the 170th ranked player in the world. Eckroat won at 101.
Yeah.
And that's what we talked about. The average was, I believe, 111 going into last week of the ranked player winning that week. And it moved up to 114th. It's now becoming much harder to handicap Jack's event there at Palm Beach Gardens.
Well, it's been, like I say, 3 out of the last 4 weeks with Dietrich. Dietrich's a fairly popular player, and I have actually been on him a couple times already this year. Unfortunately, I was not in Phoenix, but Brian Campbell especially, and then Joe Highsmith last week. I have to believe the sports books have cleaned house in the golf business the last couple of weeks, because I believe here in Las Vegas, there was absolutely not a single ticket on Brian Campbell. And I can't imagine there were too many, if any, on Joe Highsmith either.
No, I mean, the one trend that we talked about at Palm Beach Gardens was that going into the event, that all 18 winners started the weekend inside the top 10, all 18. And Joe Highsmith became the very first one to start the weekend, not only outside the top 10, but 48th place, 8 shots back. And nobody had ever been farther back than, I believe, 6 shots back. No, I think it was 5 shots back, Straka.
It's the first time in a long while, too, that someone, I think on the entire PGA Tour, that someone made, not just the Cognizant, someone made the cut on the number and then went on to win.
Crazy. So, yeah, it's look, it is what it is. You're going to have, on average, we expected as golf handicappers that you're just going to have to just move on. You're going to have 4 or 5 of them a year. And you just don't want it to get too much crazier than that. So you accept that you're going to have those weeks. That's why sometimes when you miss one that you feel you shouldn't, it hurts even more, because you get these weeks that you can't control. So we haven't really had to deal with too much of that this year so far, this season. And this week, taking a look at the Arnold Palmer, different from last week's event, we're talking about all those high ranking winners. Well, that does not happen at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. The last 29 winners ranked inside the top 100. The last 29. Goidos won in 1996 as the 265th ranked player. So he's the last one.
Remember Matt Every?
Yes, I do. He won it twice, didn't he?
Yeah, and it was wild. He was really didn't do much on the PGA Tour at all, and flamed out pretty quickly. But boy, could he play this golf course. I think he won it twice and,
Yeah.
had a couple of, I mean, it's like if he could only play Bay Hill for the rest of his career, he would have made a ton of money. But yeah, he won this thing a couple times and I think had another couple of high place finishes. And other than that, his career didn't amount to much, but that was a wild one as well. The other thing, and I've got one on my card this week, Australians have done, we talked about it last week. You've had some British Open winners have success here. And I think a lot of that has to do with the wind. I think it's true with there's more of a British Open connection at PGA National at Jack's Place. But we've seen it here too at Bay Hill. I think a lot of that has to do with the wind that we see at both the British Open and the Florida Swing. But a lot of Australians have done well here at Bay Hill. And I think that is because typically Australians do very well in wind. So Australians and like you say, players ranked inside the top 100 in the world for quite some time.
Other key event trends to keep an eye on. 12 of the last 18 winners are major champions, including 5 of the last 7. So that comes into play. I mean, Kurt Kitayama really destroyed a lot of trends when he won in 2023 because it hadn't been since 1990 when a player had never played the Arnold Palmer Invitational and then won. So Gamez did it in 1990, Robert Gamez. Kurt Kitayama then did it in 2023. Otherwise, 8 of the last 9 first-time winners made a previous top 25 here, including 5 of the last 7 making a previous top 5. So having a little bit of positive experience here usually helps. And how about this? There have been no playoffs at the Arnold Palmer Invitational since 1999. How crazy is that, especially considering that 8 of the last 11 winners or events, of course, were decided by just one stroke.
Wow.
So that's going to fall eventually. And it'll be fun too, because the 18th is a really exciting finishing hole. It'd be really great to see a playoff there.
Absolutely. And, you can get a good price on that if you subscribe to the theory that this tournament is due for a playoff. Typically, you can get about plus 350 or 3-1 that there will be a playoff. That's a proposition bet that's very popular. And again, usually it's somewhere between 3 and 4-1.
All right. Sounds good. If you're a live bettor, the last 16 winners started inside the top 25. But only one was a first-round leader. That was Jason Day in 2016. And going into the final round as a live wager, 26 of the last 27 winners of this event started the final round in the top 4. Francesco Molinari, he was the only one. He was back in 2019. He started 17th, 5 shots back. So bottom line is, you really don't want to be outside the top 4 going into Sunday, for whatever the reason is. And you also don't want to be any more than, I think it's like 6 shots back, which is, again, it's kind of unusual anywhere. But still, I just, it's sort of like the Masters, where if you're not in that final couple of pairings at the end of the going into the final round, you just don't have much of a shot.
Yeah, the Masters is one of those tournaments where, I think you mentioned it. I can't remember. I don't think it was last week, maybe a couple weeks ago. I can't remember. You were going over all the trends and talking about a particular tournament that was not a catch-up golf course. The Masters is not a catch-up golf course at all. In fact, I think, there's a certain percentage of the last 15, 20 winners. Basically, you have to be in the top 10 after day 1 at the Masters. Or you consider yourself on the outside looking in. So yeah, that's definitely a course where you have to get out to a hot start traditionally.
And I've always been, it's one of those that just surprises me because you see all of those holes and the par 5s and the dramatic eagle opportunities. And you think, well, I mean, how can you not come back in an event like that? That's there for the taking if you just get hot. And nobody gets hot, basically. It's just, I guess it also shows you that it's such a prestigious event. There's so much pressure. it's just those guys are just, it's just not as easy to feel that, like, I'm just going to go ahead and wing it, and I'm going to get hot here and eagle this and eagle that down the stretch or over the weekend at the Masters. I don't know. It's just, it's one of those strange trends. So,
well, one of the things about Augusta is I believe it is the very most, I don't know if predictive is the right word, but I guess you could call it the stickiest tournament. History repeats itself more so at Augusta National, I believe, than any other course on tour, meaning players that play well there typically do so year in and year out. So guys that typically play well there probably get off to a hot start, and then the guys that don't typically play well there aren't going to catch them. I mean, maybe that's reaching a little bit, but I'm trying to figure out maybe why that is true, that it's not a come from behind event.
Okay, so let's get into this. Speaking, by the way, of the weather, and it was such an impact this past week, which is why the scoring was higher than ever. And so it really helped. That's why getting a 64 on a Sunday was actually gettable, but not.
How about opening with a 59, huh?
Yeah. And then Jake,
Crazy.
we talked about Jake going into that event, and I think he had been 9 straight weeks on tour. And we're like, you know what? Yeah. I know he was 4th last year, but this is asking so much. So he goes out, shoots the 59. But maybe what happened was, if you think about it, the last 3 days, and it was gettable there, what was he, like 2 or 3 under par? So maybe he just kind of got a little bit worn down over the last 3 days.
It's very possible. Yeah, I remember. I can't remember where he was sitting into going into Sunday, but I really thought he was going to win the thing.
I did too.
After day one, and then he was right there the whole time. I thought he was going to go on to go ahead and kick the door down and win the darn thing. But and then we had JJ Spawn. He came close, but give credit to Highsmith. He got it done. First PGA Tour victory. And I think that's 2 years in a row. I think last year was Eckroat's first PGA Tour victory as well.
And that's another trend there. I think it's maybe 5 out of 7 now, something like that, of maiden winners at that event. So again, something that we'll definitely have to chew on for next year. Okay, let's take a look at our picks before we go ahead and run down. You have no head-to-heads this week. You only have 4 as far as your top picks. So was this more of the fact that we have a condensed field, one of these signature events? What was your strategy this week with only 4 outrights and no head-to-heads?
Yeah. First of all, I'll go over 3 head-to-heads that I looked at, but I just didn't really end up falling in love with any of them. That was Nick Dunlap at plus 115 over Jacob Bridgman.
I like that one.
Yeah, maybe I'll end up playing it, but Bridgman had a really nice week last week, but he hasn't had a good year at all. And I think Dunlap is by far the superior player. But I don't know if I'm going to pull the trigger. The other one was Cameron Davis at plus 120 over Christian Bezuidenhout. Bezuidenhout's been playing pretty well. Davis hasn't necessarily, but I thought that price was a little aggressive. I mean, Bezuidenhout minus 140 over just about anybody seems expensive.
Yeah.
And then Justin Thomas is a small underdog at minus 105 to Xander Schauffele. You and I talked about Schauffele a little bit.
That's a good one.
We'll see. Again, maybe I'll pull the trigger on 1 or 2 of these.
I like that one.
Prior to showtime, there you go. Prior to showtime, I couldn't get there. Schauffele obviously coming back for the first time since the century, since Kapalua, nursing that soft tissue rib injury. And from what I understand, he's taken extra time. Like maybe he could have come back 3 weeks ago, when he was borderline ready. Well, again, what I've come to understand is that he's taken extra time in an effort not to re-injure himself. I watched him on the TGL on Monday night, and he missed a few shots. So, not that that's necessarily indicative of what he is going to do here, but he might need a few laps under his belt before he really finds that groove again. And I like Justin Thomas this week. So again, those were the 3 head-to-head matchups I looked at. I haven't landed on any of them yet. As far as the 4 players, a couple of reasons. Yeah, you've got a lot less players in the field. So, I'm not going to be selecting 10 guys or something like that, because you just start to cut into your profits, the more, futures you add and that type of thing. But I also found it hard coming up with guys that I really felt strongly about.
Really?
I kind of went with guys that were either had real strong histories both here and at the correlated courses, or guys that were kind of young and more on the youth movement, if you will, rather than guys that you have maybe been around the block a few times. Like Victor Hovland makes a lot of sense here, but I just don't know if he is in that form again to get it done. Ludwig
You could say the
Gobert.
same thing though about Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, and again, I went with him because of his history here and at the correlated courses. He's a major championship winner, right? And
Yeah.
and it was less than 2 years ago that he was red hot.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and the year before that, he won his first major.
Yep.
So he's cooled off for about the last 18 months or so. And I liked him at Phoenix. That was another course that made a lot of sense for him. And the connection between TPC Scottsdale and Bay Hill. And so I tried him again because, Matt Fitzpatrick is a guy that I think can win anywhere at any time. He's got that type of world-class talent. And here he's being offered at nearly 100-1. It's
Yeah.
like, wow, that's a pretty big price for a very accomplished player who has had success here at this golf course and all of our correlated courses this week. So yeah, I was going up and down my list of guys, and I just like, JJ Spawn, pencils out really high this week, who I was on last week. Michael Kim pencils out really high because he's done well as of late. But are JJ Spawn and Michael Kim really going to beat the Scotty Schefflers and Colin Morikawas and Rory McIlroys of the, last week they were great picks. I don't know if they are this week. So I went through a bunch of different, gyrations here, and I really wanted to get to 5 picks, Greg, and maybe I will add another outright, but I haven't come up with that guy just yet.
All right. Well, let's take a look at the odds, and then, of course, we'll explain the reason for our picks. As usual, you have Scotty and Rory up here, and if you're one of those gamblers that have no problem taking players with odds that low, I would go at Rory. You're getting double the money. Some places you're getting 8-1. He is. I know he doesn't have the 2 wins in 3 years that Scheffler has here. But you're now asking Scheffler to win back-to-back and 3 out of 4. I mean, that's asking an awful lot. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Rory is playing, as we all know, he's just playing awesome right now. And this is a great golf course for him. He's never missed a cut. Everything in the top 30, 4 top 5s, a runner-up and a win. He did win in 2018. And he's also really solid on a couple of the correlated courses, including Quail Hollow, his domination in the Wells Fargo. He's got 6 top 5s in his last 8 with 2 runner-ups and 2 wins in his last 4. So he's actually in a better groove right now than Scheffler is. And I think he is just as good pretty much as Scheffler on this golf course. And I'm getting double the money. So if I'm deciding on if I'm that type of person, I'm definitely going with Rory because I'm getting more than double the odds.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you at all. And Rory, I don't know if I missed it there, but he's won here before too. Mm-hmm. So he's a former champion at Bay Hill as well. I just felt and I don't necessarily mind betting on Scotty or Rory when the price is right. But I thought that price was probably a little bit too low on Scotty and probably a little bit too low on Rory. But I totally agree with you. Of all those guys at the top of the board, I'd probably be on Rory than anybody else.
Yeah, because Oberg, if you look at him,
he just won,
he
and
just
a lot
won.
of time, right? So I don't necessarily like to back a guy when he just won because I think you kind of have to settle back into your game a little bit after achieving such a high.
Yeah, and then he's asked to win back-to-back signatures, and that's also very tough to do. So, yeah, I agree, especially at those odds. And again, it's all about finding the right bargain and it's playing the percentages. Schauffele, now his odds have gone up from 13 to 18, as well they should, because you get the combination of the coming back from injury, a layoff, and now he's supposed to just go in and face the toughest golfers in the world who have not been laid off. They are in a groove, and he is not. And then on top of that, this is as tough as a golf course for him that there is on the planet. I mean, this has not been a good golf course for Xander Schauffele.
Well, it's tough for anybody. I mean,
Yeah.
the rough, it's one of the few, and it's similar to Torrey Pines, where it's one of the few golf courses we have on the, outside of the majors where the rough is really thick. I mean, this is nasty rough. If you miss the fairway, that's not always the case week to week on the PGA Tour. The fairways aren't totally narrow, but they're not completely wide either. I would call them of average width. This is one of the hardest golf courses, and I think it probably has to do with the fact that rough is so thick. It's one of the hardest golf courses on the circuit to hit greens in regulation. The winning score proposition number, if you want to go under or over this week at the Westgate Superbook here in Las Vegas, is 277.5. You want to go higher or lower than 277.5. That equates to 10.5 under par. That's pretty darn low, for 4 rounds of the best players in the world taking on a golf course. And a lot of that is weather factored in for sure, or factored in, I should say, because there are supposed to be a couple days where the winds get pretty nasty. We might have a little bit of rain. There's going to be a little bit of sunshine, going to be a little bit of everything, I think, as far as the elements here this week. So that's part of that number implied as well. But to your point, not only has this golf course not been incredibly kind to Xander over the years, but it's also extremely difficult for anybody.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, the combination, like if he had a really good resume here, that'd be different. But both factors, just the odds just keep going up and up and up.
Yeah.
Why you would want to stay away from him this week. And speaking of the weather, so make sure to check the weather going into Thursday, because again, Thursday is supposed to be the highest winds of the 4 days. And you want to make sure, because if you see that some of the winds are going to be windier early in the morning versus later in the afternoon, then keep an eye on those tee times, because it's not going to be, Friday is not going to be that bad. Saturday is not going to be that bad. But then Sunday, you're getting a little bit more windy and maybe even some precipitation. So you've got the Thursday, Sunday. Those are the toughest weather days. In between, okay. But once again, you may be able to get an advantage on Thursday if the winds are high just for a few hours, depending on when that happens. I'm going to guess, just based on when I looked at it, that it's possible it's going to be in the morning where you would have a little bit more wind, just basically when I was looking at the forecast. But double check and wait as long as you can to get that forecast, because it could have a lot to do with how players wind up maybe getting off to a slow start. And it's not like, well, we'll get it back tomorrow. No, you won't get it back tomorrow, because the weather is going to be fine on Friday. So check Thursday. That could definitely come into play for everybody out there looking at your picks this week.
Yeah, it's very good advice. And I just took a look at it, and it looks to me like it's going to be a pretty steady 15 mile an hour-ish all day long.
Well, that's good then.
Yeah, it is, because I've already made my picks, as have you.
Well, yeah. But you don't want there to be a disadvantage. That's
true too. Yeah, no, I don't like to see a draw bias ever. But you're probably going to get some gusts throughout the day that will be into the 20, 25 mile an hour range too. But right now, again, it looks pretty consistent all day long on Thursday. And then you're right, the forecast calling for not much, 10 mile an hour ish on Friday and Saturday, and then back up with possible precipitation on Sunday again. And so, yeah, like I say, a little bit of everything here as far as the weather goes.
Morikawa also in this group. He's missed the cut the last 2 years. Let's keep in mind he has not won an event since the 2023 Zozo. But on this board here, we have both of our top picks. And I'm glad you did go with Justin Thomas, because I was definitely loving Thomas as well. Combination of the fact that This has been a good golf course for him. His results have improved all 3 times he's visited here. He's one of the rare players outside, of course, of the McIlroys and the Schefflers that have been able to come here under par every time he's been here, not have a bad week. And you're getting 25 to 1 or roughly, give or take, depending on when you're at. And he's playing really well. He's also a major winner. And throw in the fact that he is dominant without a win, but dominant at one of your premier correlated courses in Phoenix.
Yeah, he's had tremendous success over the course of his career. Maybe one of the most successful players in the world, the last handful, 8 years at TPC Scottsdale. Just comes off of a 6th place finish there a month ago as well. And that was the first of 2 straight top 10 finishes for Justin Thomas and his 3rd top 10 finish of the season. So the form has been really good. The last 36 rounds, he ranks 3rd in this field for strokes gained approach. He's 7th in this field for the par 4s from 450 to 500 yards. And this is, like you said, this is his 4th time playing in the Arnold Palmer, and he's been progressively better each time, finishing 49th, 21st, and then 12th last year. So maybe he can ascend to number 1 this year. He was the one guy, and the correlated courses, you mentioned it. I mean, I felt maybe he was being a little bit overlooked because he has not won in a long time. The last time he won was the 2022 PGA Championship. But by the way, that was at Southern Hills, one of my correlated courses this week. And he's also won the PGA Championship at Quail Hollow, another one of those correlated courses. So he's done really well at not only those 2 courses, but we mentioned TPC Scottsdale as well. So he was a guy that definitely made a lot of sense to me this week.
Okay. Also on this board, my top pick is going to be, I was going back and forth, even though he did not make my pick altogether, but I just decided on Patrick Cantlay over Tommy Fleetwood. I just haven't had a lot of success, obviously, with Fleetwood because he hasn't won yet on the PGA Tour. And I was a little bit worried about the fact that he's been 15 over par over the last 3 years combined. It's a longer course. And even though he really is playing well worldwide, I don't know if this is the right course for him to win. I just, that's why Cantlay is my choice. He's got a 4th place finish here a couple of years ago. He's got 2 5th place finishes on tour in the last 3 events. He had a runner-up at Phoenix a couple of years ago. He was 9th at the PGA Championship in 2023. I said on our season preview show that he was going to be sort of like my pick this year to kind of break out and have a big year. So I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and maybe see if I can back him this week.
Yeah, no, he's always a good pick. It's hard for me to just know when he's going to show up. And he's traditionally been a West Coast guy, but you spell it out there. He's done well, not only here in the past, but done well at our correlated courses as well. The one thing I almost got there with Fleetwood because I think the number is pretty good. I mean, you're talking about what is he, a top 10, top 12 player in the world, and you're getting 30 to 1 or better. So I felt the price was pretty attractive on Fleetwood, but did not. As far as the short shots, I went with Thomas, and that was it. Yeah,
Fleetwood, if you look here, he's also been good at Wells Fargo. Yeah. But he only has 1 top 5 out of 8 visits, but 4 top 20s. So I wouldn't be.
He's good enough. He's one of those guys that, he's going to get it done one of these days.
He is, yes.
And not to be unclear here, he's won many times around the world. He's just never won on the PGA Tour, and he typically plays in the only events he plays in are typically the bigger events. So that win is probably going to come at a big event. It might be this week.
That's right. You would think so. That's possible. It might even be a major. So we'll see. I mean, the Open Championship, it's not going to really count in a way because it's going to be overseas. But it's if he's going to win a major, the Open Championship is the one that most likely makes the most sense. All right. So moving along here, Zalatoris and Lowry at 45 to 1. Zalatoris, if you look at him, he's good here, 4th last year. And this was, when you're talking about him just coming off the injury, and he's got 8 straight cuts. But the problem is he hasn't had a top 10 in those 8 straight. And that is the problem. I really think I'm at the point with Zalatoris where I want to take him when he is coming off at least a top 10, something where he gets the blood flowing, the juices going, because he hasn't experienced that in a couple of years. And that's going to be hard for him. So yeah, I don't know what you think about Zalatoris or even Lowry, because he was second last year, which was a shock. Third last year here, considering his previous visits here were awful. I mean, missing cuts, making one cut with a 67th, and yet he came in here, got off to a great start, and hung around long enough until Scotty Scheffler just blitzed everybody on Sunday.
Yeah, no, I took a look at all these guys in this price range. I mentioned Victor Hovland earlier, but I'm not sure if his form is right just yet. I looked at Sam Burns, but I don't know if it's the perfect fit golf course for him. Taylor Pendrith was a guy we were on last week, and I think he's a good fit for this golf course. But I didn't like the way he played last week. So, and again, this is now a signature event. So Taylor Pendrith in last week's field is a lot more attractive to me than Taylor Pendrith in this week's field. And I know the price changes, but that's kind of the same thing for me with Shane Lowry. Is Shane Lowry going to beat Rory and Scotty and all these guys? I mean, he finished runner-up at Pebble, but Russell Henley, of all these guys, I might take a shot with Henley. Now, the one thing that's tough about him is he doesn't have the distance off the tee, and that is important. This is a pretty big boy golf course, and in my opinion, distance here off the tee trumps accuracy. Now, Henley is a deadly accurate guy off the tee, and we've seen that produce winners as well in the past. But for the most part, it's about driving distance and strokes gained off the tee, total driving. We've talked about it before. The general theme of the Florida swing is ball striking. And Russell Henley is a pretty solid ball striker, but doesn't have the distance off the tee. I wouldn't be, he plays tough golf courses well. The guy just continues to do that, time in and time again. But again, it was just one thing or another that I didn't feel right about certain guys this week, and only ended up with 4 on my card. But I think he can make a case for all the guys in this price range.
Yeah, Henley's did it again, though, last week. I mean, he's at the top of the leaderboard on the weekend, perfect position, and then he doesn't do anything on Sunday. And that's been the problem with Henley. He's this top 25 machine.
I've been there on him a couple of times where I was on him at the Wyndham a few years ago, where he had like a 4-shot lead beginning the back 9 and couldn't get it done. I mean, this guy has let me down a couple. He's also won one for me a few years ago at Mayakoba. But no, I've been on the wrong side of a Russell Henley meltdown a couple of times at least.
All right, so now we have some more picks here. We have 2 of our picks, and I was definitely considering McNeely as well. McNeely is your second choice, and even though he does not have, this is the one thing that scared me away from him, was that he's never had anything inside the top 45 here. And as we talked about, having that one good result here is pretty important. So that kind of scared me away. 22 over par combined the last 3 years. But he's much better this year. We know that. He's a much different player. He's trending in the right direction, coming off a runner-up at the signature event a few weeks ago. And he also has some good showings the last 2 years at Phoenix. So, there is a lot to like about Maverick McNeely this week.
Yeah, he's very similar to Justin Thomas in the sense that he comes in off of 2 straight top 10s, had a 9th place finish at Phoenix, and then was runner-up at Torrey Pines for the Genesis when Oberg, kind of clipped him there at the end and ended up winning. And he's got one other top 10 prior to that earlier this year at the Sentry. And yeah, I ignored McNeely's course history a little bit because, as you know, McNeely kind of missed a pretty large window of his career with injury. I think what we're seeing now is the real Maverick McNeely that a lot of people thought we were going to get many years ago before he, suffered some injuries. Of course, he wins last November for his first ever PGA Tour victory at the RSM, 3 top 10 finishes this year, has the runner-up at Torrey Pines. And I like the way he finished there. He was that close. obviously a big boy, very difficult golf course, similar here to Bay Hill, the rough, the length, all that good stuff. And coming that close and then having to chew on that for a couple weeks, I think he's ready to go back after it here again. He's 13th in this field for strokes gained approach, 19th for greens in regulation gained, 17th in hole proximity from 200 yards or more. He's 6th on those long par fours, 450 to 500 yards. And he is also 7th in this field for strokes gained putting on Bermuda grass. This is an interesting fact about Bay Hill, Greg. This golf course, when you include the par threes, more so than any other on the PGA Tour calendar, has the most approach shots of 200 yards or more. So that was a stat that I definitely took a hard look at this year, or this week rather, hole proximity from 200 yards or better, because you're going to face a lot of them here this week. And McNeely's pretty darn good at it. So obviously, he's in good form. I like that he just came up that short in his last time out, which was a couple weeks ago, and he's had a couple weeks off to kind of regroup and gather himself. So, yeah, we'll take a shot. And the number's pretty juicy as well. And again, kind of that youth movement, if you will, on a guy that I think is ready to win again and win again soon, rather than some of the other guys in the field that I just don't know if the timing is right.
Yeah, I jumped the gun last year. I was a year too early, actually 6 months too early. I even took him. I think it was Mexico. He was my pick as a one and done, and so I really thought that was going to be his time. And it wasn't until later in the year when the season was over and he flipped it to the fall. But we could tell, like you said, that.
Yeah.
So
he's healthy.
Yes, he's healthy.
He's healthy, and he's playing the way he's kind of thought we, or a lot of us thought, and himself as well, that he was going to play for a long time. So it's great to see. He's a Las Vegas resident, a local guy. And again, he may not win it, but I think he's going to have a good week. And as you know, I've played all these guys for a top 20 finish as well.
Again, the key is going to be, and I think we're going to find out after this one, since he's playing so well, is it the golf course? That's where, again, it's tougher for anybody. But having no top 45s in 4 that's something else. Or was it, well, I'm just a much better player now. And so I've got experience here, and that's going to come into play. And then you're going to realize that getting 50 to 1 on Maverick McNeely was a gift, and he's going to go out there and he's going to win his first big event. And now that's going to transform him into a completely different player when you talk about him every week. Because that's the last step.
I mean, you're right. If he was to win, that would really elevate him into a new stratosphere.
Yep.
I think that performance at Torrey Pines, because that's a U.S. Open course, major championship venue, extremely difficult course, for him to do that well there and come that close has to give him a lot of confidence.
Yep, absolutely. So again, 30 to 1, that's different. 50 to 1, you're much better off taking that chance, especially even though he doesn't have a great history here. And on this list is one of my top 3 picks, and that's Tony Finau. And I don't normally take Finau. I'm not one of those guys. I don't have a lot of success taking Tony Finau, but I'm gonna go with him again this week and see if he can finally give me something good here. I know he only has one top 25 here, but he's been under par here in 4 out of 5. And I think that's important to note. Again, that shows you that that's okay. He's also trending in the right direction. He's got a 5th, couple straight top 15s coming in here. And on some of the correlated courses, he's actually done well. He's done well. He's had a playoff loss at Phoenix. He's had a 2nd place finish at Houston last year. He won Houston a few years ago, of course. He has a 5th place finish at the BMW in 2020. So I like the fact that there's a lot to like. And I also think he's just one of those players that is just kind of being forgotten right now. I don't think anybody's really thinking about him, and I kind of like that. So
absolutely,
I'm going to give him a chance.
I think that's there. And it's a little bit similar with my play on Justin Thomas. When you see those odds drift on a player,
that's good too.
Yeah. I thought 25 to 1 was pretty juicy on Thomas. And I think you're right along the same lines there with Tony Finau. And Finau definitely makes sense at a golf course like this because he's long off the tee and he's very good on approach. And, that's what we're looking for. That's the formula we're looking for this week. So no, I wouldn't be surprised if all of us, quote unquote, all of a sudden, if he showed up again.
Yeah. All right. Bradley, by the way, has made 12 of 13 cuts here, 5 top 15s, and a runner-up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great ball striker.
So Bradley is someone to keep an eye on. Here's your Fitzpatrick and Mike Berger. So I've got Berger as my second choice. You've got Fitzpatrick in your top 4. And Fitzpatrick has 6 top 15s and 10 appearances, including a runner-up in 2019. And I remember that because that was a time where it really looked like he was in control. And then he just wasn't able to finish the deal in 2019. And I think that was one of those events that he remembered as part of the reason why he knew at some point he needed to go longer.
Yeah.
Because he was just too conservative. Like a game was too conservative back then. Anyway, so that was one of those early PGA who's Matthew Fitzpatrick from Europe guy events that everybody kind of realized that this was a kid to keep an eye on. But again, as we said, he hasn't had a top 15 in his last 14 events worldwide. But look, you are getting a good number on a player with his caliber.
Yeah, and people tuning in here, I would not advise taking Matt Fitzpatrick at 55-1. What you're showing there, I believe that's at DraftKings. Here locally in Las Vegas, I got him at 95-1, almost double that price.
And that was yesterday?
No, just earlier, or let's see. Yeah, I think it was earlier this morning.
Okay.
And I've seen it at BetMGM, which is a pretty widely available book all over the country. I saw 80-1. So I think 80-1 at a minimum is what you're wanting on Matt Fitzpatrick. And that's part of the reason I took him because, a former major champion. We were talking about this off air as well. It's been about 18 months since he's kind of cooled off, but 2022 and 2023, he was absolutely one of the best players in the world, won the US Open. He's been incredibly good at the correlated courses. He's finished 10th and 15th in Phoenix. He's been 14th and 9th here at Bay Hill, 5th at Southern Hills in 2022. That was the major before he went on to win the US Open. And then 6th and a runner-up at Olympia Fields. Those are a few of my correlated courses this week. And the last 36 rounds, he is, and this is current form, last 36 rounds anyway, he's 13th in this field for strokes gained putting on Bermuda grass. So no, the current form is not jumping off the page, but I feel that he's one of those guys that if you put him in the right situation on the right golf course, he's had tremendous success at this type of golf course. And he is, he does have that pedigree. He's that good. So, and at that price, again, it's all about the price sometimes, and so that's why I say I don't love him as a 50 or 55-1 shot, but at 80, 90, 100, yeah, that's pretty good on one of the best players in the world.
Yeah, there are a number of those bargains out there that you might want to choose on, and he's definitely one of them at that high price, and that's what you're going to get when you have some low guys in there like Scheffler and McIlroy. Look, there are a couple of players. It's going to be just. I'm not even going to overthink it, and that one of them is Berger. So he's just hot right now. I think the odds are fair. I think I was able to get 65. It's 55 here. He did miss the cut in 2019, but in his first visit in 2015, he was 13th at 10 under par. That was, of course, the course was maybe a little bit easier back then. But he does have 3 straight top 25s and a runner-up at Phoenix.
Mm-hmm. He's huge there.
Yes. And I know the
Florida kid too, went to Florida State, so, and it's similar to what we were talking about with Maverick McNeely, that there's a portion of Daniel Berger's career about 2 years or so where he was injured.
Yep.
And what we saw in Phoenix, what we saw last week, it looks, and this guy is, ball striker extraordinaire. He makes a ton of sense for all the courses in the Florida swing and has done extremely well. I know at the Honda for sure. So it looks like like we're kind of starting to see what we expected out of Maverick McNeely. We're kind of seeing the return to form. This is a guy that was a top 15 player in the world, Daniel Berger, before he got injured. So it's great to see Daniel Berger return to form. And yeah, I looked long and hard at him too, but I just didn't know. You mentioned the missed cut, and then the really good finish was kind of old Daniel Berger, and I wasn't sure if he's ready yet to kick the door down. But again, it's great to see him back. I've been betting him for, gosh, it seems like the last year now, because one of these days he's going to win again. He's that good, and I want to be there when he does.
All right. Also, in this grouping here, same thing. I'm not going to overthink it with two of these guys, Michael Kim and Ben Griffin. I was on Griffin last week, and he was this close from getting it done. Back-to-back fourth place finishes, and a very impressive 14th in his debut here in 2023. So that's a good sign. And Michael Kim, man, he just remains hot in his last four events. Second at Phoenix. Obviously, that's big. Then 13th, and 6th last week. And Kim, almost, similar like Berger, missed the cut in the same year in 2019. Berger did. And a little bit earlier in 2017 than Berger, he had his good showing in his first showing when he was 3 under par. So yeah, with Berger, with Kim, with Griffin, these are just, I'm not going to overthink it. There's some good things, correlated courses, good odds, and I'm just throwing them in my picks.
Well, and you're really going on current form. I mean, they're three of the hottest players in the world right now, and I looked at all three of them. I mentioned Michael Kim, just the step up in class, if you will. A signature event. So is he going to win against this level of competition? And then with Ben Griffin, he was another guy. Because again, I was looking for that fifth guy. I really wanted one more, and I did some research on Griffin, and I ran across what you and I saw about Jake Knapp. I think this is his 9th or 10th week in a row. And I'm just like, oh, little bit of a red flag there for me. I wonder if he's running on fumes. So I hope not for your sake, but that's what kept me off him. Just playing a lot of golf as of late.
Yeah, Kim, at least, he did have a 13th at the Genesis.
Yes.
And the second at Phoenix, it's a pretty strong field there as well. So that's good. But yeah, some of these guys, I do agree. They would have to, again, do like what Kurt Kitayama did in 2023. And break through. And
you can't argue with their current form. All three of them are really good.
There you see Jake Knapp. He just won't take a week off, and I don't blame him after what happened last week and playing, of course, this week. There's a couple of Australians, including one of your picks, and I like them again this week. It was on my picks last week, and that's Minwoo Lee at 80-1.
Yeah, I talked about how Australians have had great success at this golf tournament. That number there at DraftKings is actually better than the one I got at 80-1. I was able to get 75, and I've seen as low as 65 and 70. So 80-1 is really good on Minwoo Lee. And again, this is kind of the youth movement thing where I think this guy is, about to win and can win multiple times. He's one of, if not the very longest hitters off the tee in this field. And that is a big advantage at this particular golf course. He is very good on approach shots of 200 yards or better, hole proximity from 200 yards or more. He is 24th in this field over the course of the last 36 rounds, where he is also 6th in this field for strokes gained off the tee. He had a 12th place finish earlier this year at Phoenix, was also 18th at the 2023 PGA at Oak Hill, another one of our, long big boy golf courses that I used as a corollary this week. But Australians Jason Day and Mark Leishman won this event not too long ago, back to back. And Leishman has also finished runner up. And I go back to, Australians are typically good wind players. It gets windy in Australia. They grow up with those conditions, and they've done very well in the Open Championship, and they've done very well here on the Florida Swing, including Bay Hill. So I think it's really that ability to play in the wind, which we're going to have probably more of this week.
Yeah, and speaking of Australians, you mentioned Jason Day, Scott. They're not the worst ideas with their big numbers. Scott's had a nice run. He's doing pretty well. He's had a couple top fives here. Jason Day's a former champ. He's made 13 straight cuts. He just is still just a little bit off his game though, which is why I just couldn't take him myself this week. Moving on, I mean, Thigala. I know his odds are lower. I think he's down to like 60-1 or 70-1 in some books, but he started the week at a high price here. He still is. And he's played really well here in the last couple of years, but he doesn't have a top 10 in his last 6 events, even though he's made 13 straight cuts and has also played well at Phoenix. So, I mean, same thing with Cameron Young at 90-1. He's missed his last 2 cuts. So there are a couple of guys that are getting really good numbers, but unfortunately they're not on top of their games, even though they played well here before. So opposite of what I was doing with those 3 players, this is more of they've done well at this golf course, but their game is not necessarily playing well. So if you want to go horse for courses, there are several players that are out there that are getting big odds.
You know, I've actually seen as high as 125-1 on Cameron Young, and he was a guy.
Crazy.
He was one of the first names I wrote down this week.
Sure. At that number,
and maybe he will be my 5th guy that I'll.
Why not?
Because he's got it. We all know he's got a ton of talent. He's done well at the correlated courses. Like you say, it's just that current form that has not been spot on, but that can change.
It's not Max Homa like.
No,
I mean, he's had some success lately, so it's just.
And Thigala makes a bunch of sense too. And you're right, at 90-1, he's absolutely a bargain. Now, Young, I think you can find even higher, which I have seen higher here in Las Vegas, because I think people have somewhat given up on him. Like he's never going to, he's had 7 runner-ups on the tour and in major championships, but he's got plenty of talent. He's going to win, and it might be this week. It's a perfect golf course for him. And that price, if you can find 90-1 on Thigala, I don't necessarily care what's going on. That's a pretty good bargain.
All right, and then we'll round out because I had some of my long shot plays. One of them is right here, Patrick Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
Rogers, Rogers is in good form. 3 straight top 25.
Big hitter. Yep.
18th last week. He was 2nd at Wells Fargo back in 2015. So he's playing really well, as good as we've seen him play. Also, I did not take Grayson, but I was close to taking him. I like his form, but he's never played the golf course before, and that kind of scared me away. But I did go ahead and also take Steven Yeager. I went back to Steven Yeager. Mm-hmm. And I do wonder whether or not, like you were saying before about, is it too big of an event for a guy like Yeager? So that thing does worry me a little, but he won Houston.
Yep.
He had a good showing at Wells Fargo last year. He's obviously coming off a really good showing a couple of weeks ago, and he's a big number, as is the other long shots I put in. I'm really surprised that you're still getting also 120-1 on Nick Taylor. So I jumped on Nick Taylor.
Yeah, no, Taylor made sense. I mean, obviously a winner in Phoenix previously, a winner already this season. So he was a guy I thought about for sure. Yeager, always makes sense on these big, long golf courses because he's excellent off the tee. So no, I can't argue with either one of those.
Yeah, Taylor, he's in a run of 5 straight top 35s. That was always his problem, is being consistent. He's showing consistency now. And he was 12th here last year, his best showing, 3 under par. And you mentioned Bezuidenhout. He was also one of my long shot plays at 120-1 here. He has a top 10 here. He has 3 top 20s here. And he was 4th at Phoenix, 16th at Wells Fargo last year. So I did not take Cam Davis as a long shot, but I was this close to taking Cam Davis as a long shot. You mentioned Davis and Bezuidenhout, I believe. And even though, as you said, Davis is inconsistent, the thing is, in his last 14 events, 7 of those are top 20s, including a win. 5 of those are missed cuts. So you don't know what you're getting with Cam Davis, but he's 150-1. That's how I came really close to taking him. By the way, our boy Højgaard is in this area too. I forget where he is. He's a really big number, but he hasn't played here before. I think it was 171 the last time I saw him, unless he's backed out. I don't know if I don't see him in here anymore. And then the last one I believe I took on the board was Justin Rose. And I had to take Justin Rose because he's 250 to 1. And I'm like, and I know he's about 175 to 1 or 200 to 1 on my book. But here he's 250. And I'm sorry, but he has played well on this golf course. Matter of fact, if you look at it, he's got 5 top 10s, 3 top 5s, and a runner-up. Now, he hasn't played necessarily really well here lately. He's missed a cut 4 times in the last 5 years. But the one time he didn't make the cut, he had to withdraw when he was 5 under par. So he has history here. He was also 9th at the Houston Open in 2023. He's had good results at Wells Fargo. Overall, he's been really good there. And he was just a couple events ago 3rd at Pebble. So I'm getting 250 to 1 on Justin. So maybe really at 250 to 1 he's probably a really good top 20 pick, under that scenario. So,
I know a good friend of mine that took Justin Rose at a course where he's had tremendous history and still to this day seems to play well there. Got him at 125 to 1 to win the Masters. So maybe that's something you ought to take a look at as well. I don't think it's the worst bet you could make.
No, and to tell you, I'm glad you reminded me because I have been saying that for years. I think Justin Rose, especially because we know older mid-40 guys can win at the Masters. That
know the course so well, right?
Yes, it's surprising he hasn't won there yet. So,
well, I was on him, of course, the year he lost in a playoff to
Sergio.
Yeah,
of all people to lose that golf course to. Yeah. A guy who had no history of positive results at all.
And then put it in the weeds on the 13th hole, if you remember, and somehow, made par. I don't know. Anyway, that's history,
when it just happened.
But Justin, the point is Justin Rose has had tremendous success at Augusta.
Yes. That's a good one. I like that one. All right. So again, here are our picks. And we are going to be back again next week. For an even bigger event, the Players Championship. And that is going to be a really hard one to handicap. As we've said the last few weeks, you got players that are up and they're down there. And it's not easy.
Very hard to predict. I mean, Ricky Fowler, you look at his, record at the Players. He's won it before. He's had top 10 finishes before. And I think he's also missed the cut 4 or 5 times. I mean, and that's not atypical. The point is a lot of guys are just all over the map. There's very few guys in the world that consistently have success at TPC Sawgrass.
And that included Tiger when he was playing.
Yeah, absolutely.
He can miss
the
cut.
We need Sergio back on tour. He's one of the guys that typically did very, very well. And another 2 live guys that one of the best players, I remember landing on him in like one and done stuff. And Ian Poulter was amazing at TPC Sawgrass. I think he had 2 runner-up finishes, but was typically one of those guys that was typically very good, typically made the cut. But you look at most guys, doesn't matter who they are, top 10 one year, miscut the next. And that's a common pattern.
I don't know if it is
inconsistency.
Yeah. I think it's Matsuyama. We'll talk about it next week, of course, but I think he's like one of the rare guys that has been consistently good there. I think so, but it's really difficult. But that'll be on next week's show. Don't forget also Brady is going to be a special guest on the Playbook ATS podcast, our signature show that airs. We record it every Wednesday. Usually comes out here on Proline TV early in the evening on Wednesday. So tomorrow evening, check it out. That's why you want to subscribe here to the channel. Brady's going to be a special guest, and I'm going to let all the handicappers on that show ask as many questions as they want, pick his brain. They're not the biggest, golf experts, of course, so we're going to have a lot of fun talking with Brady on our show on the Playbook ATS podcast tomorrow, and we'll see everybody again here next Tuesday when we preview the Players.